Hello and welcome to the 33rd episode of the Extreme Sports Performance podcast. My name's Ryan Blake, I'm the founder and director of Extreme Sports Performance. In this episode I'm speaking to Jen Carter. Jen is a performance nutritionist and I'll be asking her the questions I ask all my guests. Who she is, what she does, where she come from, what she's done along the way, what are the key moments from her career so far, what are her top areas of interest, what are the most valuable things she's learned, who are her top influences, what are our top resources for information? What are our top sports performance exercises or drills? What are our top pieces of advice? And finally, where can people find her? We continue to freestyle a little bit in between questions as normal. Really enjoyed recording this one with Jen. Here we go. Hi, Jen. Welcome to the Extreme Sports Performance podcast. Thanks for coming on the show today.
Hi, Ryan. Thanks for having me. Much appreciated.
So, would you mind starting off by telling everybody who you are and what you do?
Sure. So, my name's Jenny Carter. I am a performance nutritionist. A few different roles going on at the moment, but yeah, predominantly that's kind of my background. So, I've been a performance nutritionist now for about 10 years, just over 10 years. So currently working in professional football, and also a university lecturer at Birmingham City University, and then also completing a PhD. So yeah, if you probably can't tell from the accent as well, I'm from the Birmingham area, unfortunately.
Fantastic. So would you mind just giving us a little bit of a brief history lesson in where you kind of came from, and what you've done along the journey in your career to where you are now?
Yeah, sure. So I did my undergraduate at Sheffield Hallam University in nutrition. I went on then to do in between that, once I finished and graduated, I got a job at the NHS, working as a nutritionist in weight management in the community. And then also as part of that role as well, I got an internship at Wolves Football Club. So I did that for about 6 months until that position came permanent. So that was on a part-time basis. And they haven't been able to get rid of me since. So I'm still there at the moment. And then from there, I did my postgraduate. So International Olympic Committee, so it's a sports nutrition diploma. So that was distance study for 2 years. So I completed that. And then along the way, really, just picking up jobs, mostly around the West Midlands area, really. So I worked at West Bromwich Albion for 5 years with their first team and a few other clubs, and currently at Birmingham City Football Club as well with the 23s and 18s. So yeah, I've kind of just been doing a lot of different roles along the way. Also worked in cricket with Warwickshire Cricket and also Surrey Cricket. It's a slightly different sport there. And then I've I'll say recently, but a couple of years ago, embarked on a PhD. So that's kind of taken up a lot of time now. A couple of years ago as well, got a job lecturing, and now course leader for a sport and exercise nutrition course at Birmingham City University. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at the moment. So I'm still kind of working with the university, and I'm still part-time in professional football as well.
Wow, fantastic. Yeah, brilliant. Well, that's really interesting, Jen. Thanks for that. Do you have a PhD title yet, or is that to be seen?
Yeah, I mean, it's quite broad at the moment. It's
right.
A nutrition in professional football players. It's quite broad, but it's generally, as a nutshell, it's looking at the energy intake, energy expenditure, rest and metabolic rates of youth football players. So looking at 18s and 23s. So there's a little bit of crossover there because some of them might play for the first team, but it's kind of catching them at that younger age, because there's not really been much research done in that. And also looking at the barriers and enablers for athletes, really, particularly obviously professional football players, to see what they find easier or harder to actually implement that nutrition, because they could have all the knowledge in the world, but there's lots of different factors that play a part in whether they actually implement and adhere to nutritional guidance. So looking into all of that really. So it's still early doors, but yeah, there's lots of work to be done in that area because there's really not a lot in professional football currently.
Sure thing. So what would you say the key moments from your career have been so far? What moments have kind of stood out to you, experiences, locations, opportunities, athletes, which you feel have kind of shaped your understanding or your kind of approach or thoughts on particular subjects?
Yeah, I think generally working, I was quite excited when I got my first job working for a Premiership football club. And I think being there for such a long time, so, still being at Wolves, I think you learn such a lot in that time. Things change quite a lot. I think you change as a practitioner, obviously early on to later on, you learn so many different things. And I think, even embarking on a PhD journey as well, that's kind of had a, you sort of change the way almost you see things in some respect, and really kind of value the research really. And yeah, I don't know, I suppose enjoying working in different sports really, having the opportunity to work with different athletes and different sports. I've kind of been fortunate in that way, and it's been quite exciting to work for different sports and athletes.
Sure thing. And would you say at the moment, I mean, with and or alongside your PhD, that you've got any top areas of interest at the moment that are key to the sports you work in or key to the situation the world's finding themselves in at the moment?
Yeah, definitely. I think a big part for me is actually understanding how, say for example, there's still a lot of knowledge to be found in terms of sports nutrition and athletes, but how athletes actually implement that knowledge, I think is really interesting. So looking at different nutritional interventions, like you said, things have changed quite a lot with with COVID and the way things we're doing different things now. There's some things in my practice that I'd absolutely keep. So usually, I do some cooking workshops with the players at the training venue. But now I've been getting them, doing it via video call at home, and it works so much better because they're in their own kitchens and know everything is a lot easier and more practical, easier for them to replicate if they was to do it again. So there's certain things like that I've said I definitely continue doing that sort of thing online. And even the way sport is as well, it's quite difficult to sometimes catch, especially with professional football. They're so busy with the training and got various different things going on. It can be difficult to actually get them to sit down for a nutrition chat. So actually doing video calls just on WhatsApp of an evening when they're chilling out a little bit more and they're not as busy, that's worked really well as well because it's not as rushed. Probably going off topic a little bit there, Ryan, sorry.
No problem at all. That's what this is all about. You can go as off topic as you want. And I've also noticed a similar pattern. I mean, I work with two different types of clients. Obviously, I work with sports performance athletes and also more executive kind of athletes from a health, wellness and lifestyle point of view. And trying to make things as applicable to them as possible that I suppose reflect their daily routines or their normal life.
Yeah.
You get a lot more buy-in with that. And I think that they really can absorb information better when it's applied as similarly to their daily routine or their normal life. I think when people get put out of routine or have to do things at different times or in different places where they're not used to, it can throw things on its head a bit. Does that make sense?
Definitely. No, I absolutely agree. And I think, even like advice that you give to athletes has to be so practical for them because you can design a nutrition plan, for example, and if they're not training at those specific times or, it's just not practical for them to eat at that time or those specific foods, that all plays a big part as well. So them actually being able to do it, I think as a nutritionist, and I think even athletes themselves, they could have all the knowledge in the world, but if they don't know how to apply it, then it's pretty useless. I've seen in my time, I guess, like even PhD students coming into sport for the very first time and they've got so much knowledge but they really struggle applying it, and that's kind of where that barrier is then, because that's great, everyone's got all that knowledge, but if they can't apply it and actually change a player's behaviors, for example, then I guess it's no good to anyone really. So translating that science into practice is the most important thing really.
Experience creates expertise, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
It's key, especially in an applied sports performance setting.
Yeah.
These guys and girls, these
Yeah.
people are professionals. They just want to be able to get on with what they're there to do. And it sometimes can be a bit resistant when there's not as much fluidity in that process. I've
Yeah.
made that mistake myself many a times, and you just get better at it with practice.
Yeah.
So, what would you say if you had to think of some key things that you've learned that have been really valuable to you throughout your career, possibly related to what we've just been talking about? What comes to the forefront of your mind?
I'd say that we probably just touched on a few things there, but also I think building good, positive relationships with the people that you work with, so the athletes themselves, that goes so far. Because if you haven't got that relationship, they're not as open to working with you. And I think just talking to them on the level that's not always just nutrition. Like from my point of view, being a nutritionist, if I'm just always talking to them about nutrition, they'll think that that's all that I talk about. So finding something other like personal interest, maybe some things that you've got in common that you can chat to them about. I think that helps open up and helps them trust you as well quite a lot. And I think again, I think I see that a lot in practice, that people don't have those relationships and then they wonder why things aren't changing and things like that. So I do think that's so important. And I think as well with staff, like the staff that I work with, I think having good relationships with them goes really, really well as well.
Yeah.
Because if you're just having informal chats here and there, even if it's, at the moment with COVID, it's a bit more tricky, but even if it's just by WhatsApp or the odd phone call or voice note, things like that, if you're constantly keeping in contact, you pick up little things. You might find out a player's injured that you wouldn't necessarily have known otherwise. And yeah, it's part of a multidisciplinary team really. But yeah, I think that goes a long way really in terms of relationships with both athletes and staff. And I think just showing you care as well. I think when athletes know that you care, that goes hell of a long way as well.
We're in the people business, aren't we? Whether it's sports performance or not, I think you've got to have that deep underlying connection and ability to communicate effectively to everyone in the environment you're in. Otherwise, it's just nothing is going to really stick. And as you said, people don't care about how much you know until they know about how much you care. I couldn't agree more. And again, I've made that mistake myself many times, but again, it's something that you get better at with experience and practice.
Definitely.
And COVID's presented us quite a few hurdles, and I've noticed that it's been much easier to get on with things with the athletes I've been regularly in contact with by different forms of media, versus the people I haven't had the opportunity with or not really spoken to, and things have moved at a slower process just because of that familiarity and I suppose that normality as well. So, who would you say, Jen, has influenced you across your career?
Yeah, it's a hard question really. I don't really know. I wouldn't say there's like any specific person. I think generally experts within the field, and again, I won't particularly name people as such, but definitely experts in the field who are, I guess, experts in what they do. We have something called the Sport and Exercise Nutrition Register, SCNR, and that's definitely places where I kind of like look for evidence-based advice and resources and things like that. But yeah, I don't know. I think it's been various people along the way, people who have kind of helped me in terms of being in a more senior position, but they've moved on, and then I guess I stepped up a little bit and helped guide it a little bit. But to be honest, I'd say with nutrition, it's a lot of it is you're just thrown in at the deep end, to be honest. Like a lot of jobs that I've been in, you're just thrown in and there's not really a mentor there, because often you're the sole nutritionist. So when you're quite young and you're fresh out of uni at 21 and you haven't necessarily got someone to guide you, a lot of trial and error. So sometimes you'll just make mistakes and you learn from them. I think that's a big thing in nutrition really, and it's growing, and there's definitely more mentors and things out there in positions where they can guide younger nutritionists. But back when I was doing it, there wasn't really that kind of opportunity out there. There are influences that I use for athletes as well. So like football, Cristiano Ronaldo, he's a massive foodie. He puts loads of food pictures on and stuff like that. So and the players really look up to that, and it's a way to kind of impact them as well, and just get some key messages across that are coming from a role model, I guess, really.
Sure thing. what would be your top resources for information that you need to find out about that you may not, you may or would like a deeper understanding of, and or how would you present that information? What do you find the most effective way of presenting that information to athletes for them to be able to really absorb?
Yeah, I mean, I guess it depends in what types of context. I suppose there's different ways in which I get resources. So like I alluded to there, things like the SCNR is a really important body for us, really. But then certainly things like research articles, and that's, you know, that's where the skill then really comes in and translating that over to the athlete. So you might read a research article on, you know, a particular supplement or a new strategy, and then the idea is to then translate that into practical advice for the athlete. So, you know, it's completely different, the paper, to what actually that looks like in terms of translation, making it as easy as possible for them, as understandable as possible. And I think probably a lot of people who I work with as well, so for example football coaches, S&C coach, I learn a lot from the club chef, different things that come in there regarding, you know, his expertise. And yeah, I guess the people that I work with, I learn a lot. I like to understand what's going on, even things like, you know, physio, psychology. Psychology is a massive thing in nutrition, so I find all that really interesting in terms of behavior change. There's, you know, yeah, really important stuff there. But yeah, I guess that's my main ones, really.
Okay, that makes sense. I love those answers. Brilliant. Could you give us an example of the top exercises or drills that you might use with a footballer when you first meet them, just to maybe find out more information about their strengths or their weaknesses?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, to be honest, especially the first time that I might meet an athlete, I'd have an informal conversation with them. So I found from previous experience, you know, sitting in an office, quite a, I guess, formal environment doesn't go down that well. You know, just seeing them around the training ground, having a chat to them when they're coming in from training, or best part as well, I guess, for me being a nutritionist, is sitting upstairs with them when they're grabbing their food. So they go up to the food counter, and, you know, I'll have a little sit and chat with them about certain things, and that's where a lot of information comes out, rather than make it quite formal. I think there's always a fear that, you know, you might, you know, tell the coaches around certain practices that they're doing. So it's a bit more I think trusting when they know you're on that kind of level. But yeah, in terms of like tools and stuff that I would do, informal chats are a big one for me. Obviously things like nutrition plans to help with adherence. Social media is a big one, like especially for, you know, younger players and maybe even older ones. They're, you know, they're often scrolling on Instagram and things. So one of the things I've recently done actually is set up an Instagram page for them, where I just post out little nutrition messages, recipe videos, different things around their training and match days. And it's a way to impact them, because sometimes, you know, things might get lost on things like WhatsApp messages, but when they're just scrolling aimlessly of an evening when they've not got much to do, that's when you can get some of those key things across. But yeah, I mean, in those informal conversations, that's where I find out a little bit about them in terms of their strengths and weaknesses, and what it is that they need to work on. There's something in nutrition called the COMBI model. It's around behavior change, so it relates to capability, opportunity, and motivation. So it's about finding out from them, you know, what motivates them. A lot of the time it's performance. So if they see, you know, performance improvements, then they're likely to implement that. It can be things like body composition, so that can motivate them quite a lot. And then things like role models as well. And then things like opportunity. Have they got the opportunity to change? So have they got the right environment? You know, they may be living with someone who hasn't really got the skills, or have they got the skills to cook? In terms of like their capability and things. So I kind of use a lot of finding out about their strengths and weaknesses based on that model, because it does tell me quite a lot, and then we know what we need to target.
So I work with, as you know, predominantly lots of youth athletes in many different sports. And the key things I see in them is that their eating patterns are either complete disaster, or they're okay, and they're obvious things that they can improve. But the question I get asked a lot, particularly by, I'd probably say, the mid to late teenage athletes, are about protein supplements or creatine supplements. I'm sure that's probably not the first time you've heard that, but what would you if someone asked you that question, if a teenage athlete asked you that question about supplements, what's your stance on that?
It can be a little bit of a grey area, to be honest, Ryan. I mean, with protein supplements, any kind of supplements, to be honest, the players that I work with, generally, I would only really advise them above 16 years. And I'd encourage that, well, to be honest, even with older players, I always encourage a food first approach. So get their nutrition from food and then only resort to supplements when they really need to. There can be certain circumstances where younger players might need supplementation. There's things like definitely evidence for things like vitamin D, potentially things like calcium if their intake's really low. But there's no real need for protein supplements as such when it can be so easily, you can so easily get it from food. So I think really on that respect, that's kind of what I base my advice on is, always a food first approach, and especially for 16s and below really, and then anything above that, then I think that there can be a place for it, if it's done correctly as well. That's the key thing.
Of course, that's what I always say, healthy balanced diet first, and then if there are things missing or not possible to have at certain times, then consider it. But I would always direct them to the Inform Sport website or the Global Dro website. Are there any other resources that you might recommend that they visit that could be useful?
I mean, to be honest, for athletes, those are the two key ones. I wouldn't really direct them anywhere else because I think they'd probably just get a little bit confused with the mass amount of information. So in terms of like actually checking supplements, Inform Sport on the actual website, and then the Global Dro, like you said. Obviously there's WADA, but that doesn't really mean anything to athletes.
Of course. So last couple of questions, Jen, before I let you go. What would you say your top pieces of advice would be to people that listen predominantly to this podcast are multi-sport athletes of various different levels and various different ages, coaches, sport-specific coaches, teachers and parents? What would you say? I mean, it's hard to generalize, I know, but if you had to give some advice to that cohort of listeners, where would you start? Maybe some simple points, takeaways for them.
I mean, I think the key one for me really is start young. So it's one thing that when I speak to coaches and various different people, one of the things that always comes out of it is that, we should be starting nutrition and education younger than what we are really, so that it's kind of embedded as they get older. And I think, it doesn't have to be the perfect diet, especially when, they're young. And I think it doesn't mean to say you can't have chocolate bar or a packet of Cronuts. Like, of course they can. It's just about the moderation and making sure they're hitting all the things they need to. So it's almost like little changes can make such a big difference. So, if an individual's diet isn't perfect, then it's just little steps to improve it. So one thing at a time. You try and set yourself too many goals, then it likely won't work. I think that's the biggest one for me really is just starting it young. And I think being open to try things as well. Because often when, athletes do try something and they see the benefits, that's when they continue it. Where the barrier is when someone's not willing to try it and then they don't see any benefits. They never understand the value that nutrition can have. But if they try it for themselves so many times, I get athletes say to me, "Oh, can't believe it. Like, I'm feeling so more energized in games now." Let's say they was under fueling and I've recommended they have more carbohydrates, for example. When they feel the benefits, then that's it. Like, that's what they'll be doing continuously then. So just be open, try it, and I think start young as well.
Brilliant. So simple things done well, consistently with good quality. You can relate to every aspect of sports science, can't it? That's what I say daily to various groups and teams. And it's not just strength and conditioning, it's nutrition, it's mental skills, like sports injuries. It can apply to all of those aspects. So brilliant points to finish on, Jen. Thanks very much. So if people are listening to this and they would like to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to do that?
Probably on Twitter. I don't use it a huge amount, not as much as I should. But I mean, my Twitter name is Jen_nutrition Dacey. So quite simple.
Brilliant. I'll put that in the show notes at the bottom for everyone listening so that you can access that directly. But Jen, I'd just like to say thanks for your time. It's nice to catch up with you again after so long, and
Definitely.
thanks for coming on the show. It's been a pleasure having you as a guest.
Thanks for having me, Ryan.
Thanks for listening to the 33rd episode. We hope you enjoyed the show. It would really help us out if you could please leave a rating and or review on whatever platform you're listening on. Be sure to check out our website, www.extremesportsperformance.com. That has details about our in-person and online services, our in-person and online store, our in-person and online education, our media pages, our contact details, and how to subscribe for free to stay informed about company news and updates. Join our social media community on LinkedIn, Instagram, Facebook, YouTube and Twitter. Links to these can be found at the bottom of all pages on our website and via any search engine. Until next time, take care.